Episode. I won't have to do this shit ever again. Unless, new All-Stars come in a later season, in which case I might add on to this playlist. But who gives a fuck? Episode 25. It's time for Sparky. Hailing from the Season 5 breaking results, Sparky is a sheer force Boltund with searing shot, steam eruption, sludge wave, and moon blast. So, what do we notice about this thing? We've got a special attack stat really close to Nidoking, an ability really close to Nidoking, pumped full of coverage options similar to Nidoking, and a stat line that is not at all similar to Nidoking. But let's talk about it. There's one Sparky set. That Sparky set is essentially this. The moves are kind of arbitrary. You kind of just throw whatever the fuck moves you want on this thing. But it's a sheer force special attacker. I equate this to what is essentially a third Nido. That is, if there is a sort of offensive-defensive spectrum between Nidoking on the more offensive side and Nidoqueen on the more defensive side, Nidoking gets shoved in the middle as Sparky joins the fray and swings hard towards the offensive end of this. Nidoking's special attack is 85, Sparky's is 90, very close, and yeah, Sparky, okay, I'm going to say this a lot, but Sparky is a Nido that sold its defensive soul for speed. What do I mean by this? When you look at the profile of a Nidoking, you'll see, not great, not horrible, but decent defensive stat line, and a typing that's more defensively useful than it looks. Like, you've got a plethora of great resistances, a couple of solid immunities, you've got utility options, and if you want to stealth rock, or if you want to T-spike, or if you want to taunt stuff. Does Sparky get taunt? Sparky does not get taunt. Yeah, I'm griefing. Let's go. You've got physical potential with the Nidoking. You can smack down stuff, do Super Fang, Sucker Punch shenanigans, whatever the hell you really want with this thing, because it's very versatile and takes advantage of this typing to be a great check to a lot of different things. Sparky throws all of that out the window for speed. The typing, the defensive utility, the typing, the defenses, the resistances, the utility options, all that completely hits the bin when you go with Sparky, and all you get in return is speed. That isn't necessarily a bad thing. Sure, Sparky is going to be complete and utter suffering to get in. I mean, 69, 60, 60 isn't the best stat line known to the universe, and especially when it has some switch-in, and especially means it's going to have switch-in problems to make use of its speed. However, Sparky gets pretty similar to Mega Medicham in that the pain and suffering necessary to get it in becomes absolutely worth it because of the rampant benefits it provides. Because it just clicks Thunderbolt, and then certain grounds, like the Water Weak ones, like pre-mentioned Nidos, or something like a Steelix, they just completely explode. Because Sparky's Steam Eruption gets pretty dumb. Sparky essentially will run Sheer Force Life Orb and 4 special attacks every single game. Let me go out and say this right now. People will think that Volt Switch is good on Sparky. I'm of the opinion that it isn't, because more often than not, Sparky is the thing you want to get in, and it's not going to have too great of defensive checks. If the opponent does have a defensive check to Sparky, it's more than likely a water-immune ground, such as a Seismitoad or a Gastrodon, or potentially a Quagsire if they tech for it. It's more than likely going to be a water-immune ground, which means your Volt Switch is going to do jack shit anyway. If Volt Switch would be a good move, it's likely because you're running into a Chansey or Audino-esque special wall, which is perhaps the only reason why the attack should even be considered. But even then, you just hard swap into your whatever switch into Chansey is, which Chansey has a lot of good switch-ins. And you just get to work there. Sparky does not need Volt Switch, because having Volt Switch means you're going to give up on a crucial coverage option, because all of its coverage moves are very specifically tailored to the things that Sparky wants to kill. Like, it has to Steam Eruption the grounds, it Searing Shots the grasses, it Moonblasts the dragons. And you don't want to Volt Switch on the opposing water as it switches out, because you just want to click Thunderbolt and then click the corresponding coverage option for whatever the hell comes in. And odds are your switch-in's going to be an electric immunity, which you can then blow up with a coverage move. So you don't really need to pivot out with Sparky. It wants to be in and be threatening while it is in. Don't make Sparky leave of your accord. Force your opponent to force Sparky to switch. All right, that's my sensible rant, because Volt Switch on Sparky isn't actually all that great. Speaking of what's not all that great, physical Sparky sets. They're not too solid either. They're just gonna get fucked by the grounds. Everything sucks. I guess you can do like sheer force stuff with... No, you can't even boost Wild Charge. You can boost something like a Play Rough, but at that point just run Strong Jaw. Sparky really just... It only does defense. Or it only does offense. It only does special offense. That is what Sparky does. It's extremely one-note in this regard. It is a one-note Pokemon. For the opposition... Look around your team, see if you have like a water immune ground or a completely rote special wall, ideally a normal type one, because you have the risk of getting your fairy type special wall, like a Florges. You have risk of getting that sludge waved, and shit just hits the fan really fast. It's gross. So if you have a check, if you have like a hard wall, use it, because Sparky is never going to be boosting. It's just going to be straight attacking you. If you don't have a hard wall, resistance berries, resistance berries, resistance berries. Sparky's strength is in its coverage, not as much its power. You're running off a 90 special attack stat, and yes, Sheer Force Life Orb does provide a considerable boost, but it is still a 90 base attack stat, running off of the strongest attack being Thunderbolt, because that's the stab option. Resistance berries are going to be extremely useful, as well as never letting it get a clean switch, which requires in-game planning of if this opponent U-turns, then what's going to happen to my greater game plan, what is going to happen with Sparky on the bench, ready to come in and probably just take a knockout. And another piece of advice I can say, which loops into the resistance berries thing, brawl with it. Sparky is never taking more than one hit a game, and even then, it struggles to take that first. Because what first does it realistically take? Let's just go to a blank Bolt Hunt set so that we can get... God damn it. I said, let's go to a blank Bolt Hunt set. And... y'all, I'm pissed. I said, let's go to a blank Bolt Hunt set. Technical difficulties moment. And brawl with it. What would you expect to take from, like, a 90 special attack, bulky water, like an unboosted Suicune Scald? That's 40 to 50. It takes nearly half its health from this really weak move. From a mon it wants to be coming in against, which gets even worse. What other things? Tornadus, Therian, Hurricane. It wants to switch in on that, right? Well, Hurricane does a very similar amount of damage, and Focus Blast is a straight 2-hit KO. Brawling with Sparky, if you don't have an explicit hard wall to it, brawling with it is really the only way you are going to get away with beating it, which means resistance berries get incredibly useful. Use them because Sparky is worth it. It's similar to the Nidos in that way as well. When you're fighting an offensive Nidoking, or just Nidoking in general, you kind of have to assume, yeah, switching into this is hard, so you just have to beat it with offense and try to not give it great capabilities to switch in on your team, which For Nidoking, that's easier said than done, but with Sparky, it's as easy done as said. Most of the time. Yeah, it just takes some planning and in-game knowledge of what the game state is going to be like. Can you risk certain Pokemon being in so that Sparky isn't in, so you can enact your game plan with greater ease? Yeah. Beating Sparky really comes down to just outslugging it, brawling with it, exploiting the fact that it really can't hard switch in on itself by itself, and if it comes up short, it's probably hitting the bin. So make it come up short. Resistance berries are the best way to make it come up short. I've said resistance berries a lot this video. Fucking hell, But, yes. That's my Sparky analysis. And I am finally done with this series. At least for the next couple of months. Until, another All-Star season starts up again and we get new All-Stars or something. Oh, baby. Well, it's been a fun ride. And it was a pleasure to do this. I'll catch y'all soon.